What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Alpha Skies. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about a very specific topic that a lot of players have actually been discussing lately over on Twitter and things like that about Destiny 2, that being the topic of is Destiny 2 a hard game or not? On my channel, I typically like to kind of pinpoint and target the audience of solo players or maybe small groups of friends, generally around 2 to 3 people, that like to grind this game out together fairly consistently. And obviously, with that being the main audience that I like to target, we're going to be kind of looking at that question today from that perspective. So the activities in question that we're actually going to be discussing today are going to be some of the more pinnacle-based activities, those being raids, Grandmaster Nightfalls, and Trials of Osiris. But before we even get into the pinnacle activities themselves, let's go ahead and first ask ourselves the question, is Destiny 2 itself actually a difficult or hard game? And the answer to that does have a direct correlation to the actual topic of this video we're discussing. And obviously what I mean by that is that it depends on your actual playstyle and how much you actually want to dedicate yourself to this game. This primarily has to do with how passionate or how much you actually enjoy this game and how much time you want to invest into it or how much you already invest into it. So if you find yourself to be more of a casual player who doesn't care all that much to invest just a whole lot of time into this game and it doesn't really matter to you to actually chase some of the very high-end pinnacle loot, then I would say the difficulty of the game overall obviously goes down quite a bit, as all that really matters to you is just to play and enjoy yourself and enjoy the environment that you're in. But if you're a player that's more than willing to invest a fairly decent amount of time into the game and whatnot, and you actually want to learn and do and participate in a lot of these pinnacle activities, the difficulty you're going to find does go up by just a little bit. Let's go ahead and address one thing before we get into the major topic itself, and that's the loot in question. Is the loot that a lot of these players are insisting chasing towards that are actually the pinnacle drops, are they actually worth getting? And the answer to that is once again dependent on how much you actually want to invest in the game and how much you want to chase when it comes to the loot in question. A really good example to look at would be the Succession sniper rifle that drops from the Deepstone Crypt raid. There is actually an alternative to this weapon that performs just as good, if not even better in certain situations, which is the Thoughtless sniper rifle. So the major point that I'm actually trying to get at is that yeah, the loot is really cool and it's very unique and there are some really powerful roles that are on it. My major point being that you can actually get a lot of weapons in this game that aren't going to be as much of a grind to actually acquire, and with them being easier to acquire, you're obviously going to get to use these weapons sooner as well. But now that we really have everything out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into this topic firsthand. The first major roadblock that you're going to encounter when it comes to any of these pinnacle activities is going to be the D2 elitists. These are going to be a lot of the Destiny veterans that have been playing this game for a very long time, and they're basically going to be requiring individuals to be at a certain level, have certain weapons, or just flat out require you to have certain levels of experience or knowledge with the activities in question. Some of them will even look up your tag and information to see how many of these raids you've completed or not. And being more of a solo player or playing with a small group of friends and you've never done these things before, you're automatically going to be counted out and ineligible to run these activities with these groups purely because they don't like that you've not invested as much time as they have. On top of that, if you do manage to actually get in these groups, you're also going to run into the difficulty of if you don't actually complete the encounters in a specific method or strategy that they like to do, that they follow strictly, then more often than not, you're actually going to find that you're going to be kicked. I personally have played Destiny since the beta of Destiny 1, and honestly, elitists have been around for an extremely long time, and they have caused a lot of issues in the gaming community of Destiny for quite a while now. For the people that know what I'm talking about, back in the day of Destiny 1, you literally would not be able to get in any raid groups on LFGs whatsoever if you did not have Galahorn. And in Destiny 1, Galahorn was not guaranteed from a quest or anything like that until much later in its life cycle. It was actually an RNG drop. And with that being the case, obviously that meant that if you did not have good enough RNG to get a Galahorn drop, you just were not eligible to run these raids with different groups on LFG because you didn't do enough TPS or just didn't do as much as they wanted you to. I personally do not agree with the elitist community of that if you do not have a certain threshold of experience whenever it comes to these activities that you are just completely ineligible to participate with me, period. I do think there are certain circumstances where if you have to get a raid done relatively quick because you have work or something you have to attend to, that's one thing. Or even if you have a clan and you just don't have the room for it, I think that's fine too. But if you're looking for 2 or 3 people to come and help participate and clear the raid, if they don't have the most experience in the world, that's perfectly fine. I think it's much better for you to spend a little bit of time investing in these players and helping them learn how to clear these things instead. But putting the elitists to the side, I think we also need to go ahead and address something that I think is even potentially a much bigger issue as well. And I think that issue being somewhat that a lot of the Destiny 2 players are honestly kind of lazy. As I had mentioned at the beginning of the video, whether or not you're going to be able to do these activities has a direct correlation to how much time and how much effort you actually want to invest into this game. If you're not spending any time to acquire any of the base exotics, a somewhat decent loadout, having an actually decently relevant build into the game, or having little to no knowledge in any of the activities that you're actually wanting people to carry you through, then I honestly don't think you should be that surprised to find that most of the groups, if not all of them, don't actually want to help you with these activities. So if you haven't done any of these activities before and you don't have a whole lot of experience, what do you need to do to actually get into these? The first of which I think is extremely simple, is simply going to YouTube, doing a search on there on the actual activity in question, finding some guides online, and making a build that revolves with those guides, and having a basic understanding of how these activities work. Figure out what weapons are actually good in the current meta for whatever activity it is that you're doing, and go and acquire that loot. Because more often than not, if people see that you're actually putting effort in yourself, they're going to be much more likely to help you out, as opposed to if you just show up in there with absolute garbage loot, none of the weapons are actually decent, the rolls on them are also crap. It'll just end up sending a fairly straightforward signal that you don't care too much about this activity anyway, and you're honestly just going to rely on them to do it for you. So once again, spend a little bit of time and invest going into YouTube and things like that, looking at these guides, getting and building a very good basic foundation of how these activities work, so that when you go into them, at least having an understanding, people are going to be much more willing to teach you and help you. So let's go ahead and get into discussing each individual pinnacle activity. The first of which that we're going to discuss is going to be raids. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is what makes raids difficult. The absolute main difficulty when it comes to raids is going to be two things, especially for solo players, is going to be finding people to do it with, and then understanding how these mechanics work. And as I've already mentioned, one workaround we can do to go ahead and knock one of those two things off the list is the mechanics. There are so many different content creators on YouTube that actually do guides for a lot of these raids. You can find guides from some of the bigger YouTubers like Dado, and then you can find some from some people that just have very small followings. Regardless of who it's from, go and try to find these guides so that you can understand how the mechanics of each of these raids work. If I were in a group that you were involved with, I wouldn't expect you to get it the first time either, but as long as you had a basic understanding, and I knew that you were going to learn it relatively faster than somebody who has no understanding of how it works at all, and I'm sure everybody else on the fire team would feel that way, we would all be more than comfortable and happy with having you there and teaching you how to do what you need to do. What do people really dislike about doing raids if they've not done them already? I think the very first thing that's honestly more obvious than anything that people don't like about any of these activities when they go into them, especially if they've never done them before, is that they don't want to be embarrassed about the fact that they haven't done them, or even honestly just don't even really want to talk or deal with a whole lot of people. And I feel more for solo players that are going to be going into these large raid groups, especially never doing them before, they're just going to feel like they're honestly helpless. But if we actually take a look at it for what it is, raids are honestly not a difficult activity in the least. Once again, they just require you to have a little bit of knowledge as to what the raids are about, what the mechanics are, and then you just have to communicate a little bit with the people around you. And if you slip up or something like that when in one of these encounters, don't be afraid to mention it that you've actually messed up. Players are going to be more mad if you actually stay silent about messing up on a mechanic or something like that, because you can end up causing a wipe and nobody knows what's going on, and so it frustrates a lot of people. But if you're open about it, maybe you're too slow on killing oracles in Vault of Glass or something like that, then somebody can just come over there and help you do it. So just make sure you're communicating with the other people there, because I promise you, if you are open about it, people are going to be more than willing to help you. Shifting from raids over to Grandmasters, are they difficult? If I'm being 100% honest with you, yes, I would say Grandmasters are actually fairly difficult. The main reason you're going to find that people hate these Grandmasters is because they do take a little bit of time to get a decent loadout for these, and then you're also going to have to invest quite a bit of time in getting your light level up through your artifact as well. I myself used to play with a lot of players back in Destiny 1, but since I moved over to Destiny 2, I have gotten a very good taste of what it's like to be a solo player over here. And the most difficult thing for a solo player in Grandmasters is once again going to be communication. You're not only going to spend a lot of time having to acquire the gear that you actually need to jump into these activities, but you're going to be scouring around quite a bit on LFG trying to find a consistently decent group to actually run with. Because unfortunately, as somebody who has had to run around the Destiny LFG for Grandmasters a little bit here and there, majority of the people on there say they're looking for groups to play with, but honestly they're just looking for some people to carry them. So with that being the case, I would say you're much better off farming Legend or even Master Nightfalls as opposed to Grandmasters if you really want those weapons. It's probably not worth going the extra mile to get the Adept version of them. Last, but certainly not least, let's go ahead and start discussing Trials of Osiris. Is it really difficult? This is kind of a hard question to answer purely because Bungie has found themselves tinkering and messing around with trials quite a bit, especially in these last few years. So it just kind of depends on the circumstances, what kind of week it is, what's available, what's the game mode, how have the weapon adjustments been, what is currently in the meta. There are actually quite a few things that influence whether or not Trials of Osiris is going to be easy in a certain period of time or not. Being a solo player is very, very hard in Trials of Osiris, especially if they don't have the Trials lab where you can play in solo queue, because just about everybody you're going to see on the LFG for Trials of Osiris are going to be strictly asking for you to meet a certain KD ratio or better, which I find to be ironic because most of the time a lot of these players that are having requests for people to have like a 1.5 or 1.6 KD or above, they usually end up having a career best of only around a 0.8 KD. But that's besides the point. Obviously, Trials is going to be a lot harder in the regular playlist as opposed to solo queue. So if you're a player that actually plays PvP and you feel like you're decently well, keep your eyes peeled for that, because if the solo queue Trials is actually out, I personally have found it to be a lot easier than the regular. Now moving away from that, we're going to assume that you do want to invest the time and the effort into the game. So let's go ahead and ask ourselves right now, are these activities actually worth doing? I think in the simplest way that I can put it, I would simply say that yes, it is very much worth it. The first major thing that I can recommend to you and that I would recommend to you to actually go and do is to jump into the Destiny 2 LFG and go try and find some clans. Most of these clans will specify whether they are PvE oriented or PvP oriented, but you just want to find one that you think is going to be a good community that's fitting for you. This is going to help you meet a lot of new people, and they're going to be giving you a lot of honest advice and helping you work on the things that you need to work on. Because universally, all throughout Destiny, the one thing you have to have when it comes to this game is communication. And if you've got a group of friends that are willing to do these activities with you and help you, you're not only going to complete these activities a lot faster than you would if you were just simply searching around solo, but you're going to have a much better time doing it. But with all of that out of the way, I appreciate you guys for swinging by and watching this video, and if you do enjoy content like this, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when my videos go live. If you're looking for some guide videos on how to get some good exotic gears so you can get started, go ahead and check some of the guide videos I have on my channel as well. And now that we have all of that out of the way, I hope you guys have a good startup into finding a group that fits you, and I wish you the absolute best RNG in getting any of the roles or weapons that you decide you want to farm. Once again, I'm Alpha Skies, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.